This happened when I was like 6 or 7 years old in 1970 or 71. My dad and I had gone to my grandmother's house to do some yard work and had been there all day. We were heading home and it was like 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. We were about a mile or two from home and my dad pulled into the gas station that we always go to. The man who owned the gas station was named Jimmy, and he was usually the attendant there on weekends. Jimmy and my dad were good friends. They would always talk about things, and he would tell me to go grab a soda out of the cooler. He was a super nice guy and everyone in town knew Jimmy. I remember Jimmy being an older man, but thinking back on it, anybody older than 30 years old is old to a 6 or 7 year old kid. This place is not like the gas stations we have today. They sold gas, cans of oil, and had a drink box with sodas and that was it. They also close at like 11 p.m. or 12 midnight on the weekends depending on the customers. We pulled up in our old truck and could see the light on inside the small office building. There were some old wooden chairs right outside the office where Jimmy usually sat to greet people as they pulled up. Jimmy usually would get up and walk over and start talking to us as we filled our vehicle. Tonight, there was no Jimmy. They had a small bathroom attached to one side of the office, so we figured Jimmy was in there. When he pulled into the gas station, there was a black hose on the ground that would make a bell chime twice to let Jimmy know he had a customer. My dad didn't think much of it and began filling the truck. Still no Jimmy. My dad finished filling up and was starting to get a little concerned. This wasn't like Jimmy. He told me to stay in the truck. I had fallen asleep on the ride from my grandmother's house and was still a little groggy. My dad went over to the bathroom door. He knocked on it and called out Jimmy's name. No reply. He tried the door handle and it was locked. He went to the other side of the building where Jimmy normally parked his truck. There was no truck. He then went inside the office. He stepped in and just froze. He stood still, but I could see the back of his head. From his head movement, I could tell he was looking over to the right, then he quickly looked to the left, down at the floor, and then down at his feet. He seemed to jump back like he had been shocked. He came rushing back to the truck, not running, but moving quickly nonetheless. The old fluorescent lights that hung over the pumps give you kind of a ghoulish pale look normally, but I could tell he was as white as a ghost, and it wasn't because of the lights. He jumped in the truck and cranked it right up. I was scared, and asking him what was going on. He said we need to get home, and to just hang on, we have to go. This was a time before cell phones, and there was a payphone on the corner of the filling station, but we didn't stop there. We got home, and my dad called the police. He told me to get into the house, and he got back in his truck, told something to my mom, and went spinning out of our driveway, heading back to the gas station. My mom made me go to bed, and she waited up for my dad's return. I couldn't sleep, so I laid in bed and waited for his return as well. It was about 4 hours before my dad got home. I creeped to my bedroom door to listen to him tell my mom what happened. The gas station had been robbed. There was blood drops on the floor of the office and on the cash register. There was a lot more blood in the grass and gravel where Jimmy's truck was usually parked. He said it looked like the struggle began on the side of the building where his truck was usually parked. The police had found a bloody pipe in the grass behind the building. The pipe at one end was threaded, and there were blood and hair fibers stuck in the threads. The police speculated that Jimmy was attacked and beaten behind the building and was led into the office to open the register. A filing cabinet had blood on it, and Jimmy may have kept a cash lockbox in the bottom of the cabinet. The police kicked down the bathroom door. Jimmy was laid on the floor in a puddle of blood. He had gotten shot once in the head. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I finally came out of my room, crying, and told them I had heard it all. We don't know how close we were to showing up in the middle of a robbery and murder. I would wake up from nightmares a lot of nights for the next few weeks. Sometimes. I still do. When I was younger, every year for Christmas, I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this road. All I know is it runs by Akron, New York at some point. However, most of the drive is through rural areas, with little to no towns nearby. So, it was the dead of night, and my groggy self had gotten off a long shift, and had to drag my ass to my aunt's house, since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother told me he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or was straight lying. I saw an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign. It was literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with "Gas off next exit," or something along those lines painted on. That seemed a little sketchy, but people do the same thing with fruit stands on highways, so whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some run-down country-ass road through dense woods. The whole thing was creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw. Anyways, eventually I came to the gas station and realized quickly it hadn't been open for years. It was all rusted, and the convenience store's roof was caving in. The gas pumps have been taken out as well. I pulled over next to it and checked my gauge. I would probably only make it another half mile before running out. So I called AAA, and they said they sent a truck over. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off, everything was pitch black, and my paranoid self was sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of a forest in complete darkness. So most of the wait went uneventful, until I sensed movement around the side of the old store where my lights are pointed. I look up, but I didn't see anything anymore. So I look back down at my phone. Then over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy, come here," in a demanding tone. I look up, and I shit you not, there's a dude standing by the old store, looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like a run-of-the-mill homeless guy. I was honestly spooked, and figured he must have been squatting there. Still watching him, I rolled down my window and yelled something like, "Yeah, what's up?" I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble. "You got any change?" "Nah, I don't. Sorry, man." I look up at him. He has this kind of vacant expression and is standing stiff. Then I see more movement. There are heads. About 20 or so heads, peeking around trees, beyond the man I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they are definitely people. Literally just heads, staring in my direction from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and then I turned around and sped off. I got as far away from that place as my tank could carry me, and updated AAA on my location. The driver came back over and filled me up, and I didn't say anything. But after he left, I wanted to call the cops. So I called the nearest town's sheriff department. They said they'd send a trooper over, and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said whoever was there was gone, but they could tell a large number of people had been living there for a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual. The whole situation still freaks me out, but frankly, I can consider myself lucky. I'll always have such a creepy story to tell. I'm an 18-year-old woman, and I work at a gas station off a highway. I usually work short shifts because I'm in college. I've only ever closed twice, because I don't work the late shift, but I was covering for someone tonight. I was alone after 5 p.m. because my manager left, and the garage closed. It was pretty boring tonight, besides the few conversationalists who came in, and one guy who got surprisingly angry when I wouldn't give him my number. I'm wondering if he tried to get revenge tonight. At around 9:30 p.m., I noticed a car just sitting at the gas pump, furthest away from the store. They weren't pumping gas, and their car was still running. After a little while, I shut the outside lights off because it was near closing time and I wanted them to leave, but they stayed there. I called my boyfriend because I felt uneasy. I wanted him to tell me I was being paranoid. I hoped that they were just some kids smoking in their car or something. He kept me company on the phone as I counted the drawer. After I finished counting, I closed everything up and went to the back to put my paperwork away. In the back, I checked the cameras. Looking at the cameras, I could see just the corner of their car. It seemed like they were purposefully parked in a way where I couldn't see their license plate, but I could still see they were out there, meaning they stayed there for over a half an hour in complete darkness. I told my boyfriend I was getting freaked out, and he told me just hurry up and get home, and everything would be okay. Now, at my gas station, I have to lock the front door from the outside, meaning I would have to stand in perfect view of the car with my back turned. This scared me, but I knew I had to do it if I wanted to leave. I have pepper spray, so I made sure I carried it in my hand, just in case, and I went outside. I tried locking the door as quickly as possible. I still hoped I was being paranoid. As my back was turned, while I locked the door, I heard a car door close behind me, and I felt my heart drop. It was like my worst fear came true. My hands began to shake as I fumbled with the lock. I was so scared he was coming up from behind me. When I finally locked it, it felt like forever, but it was probably only a few seconds. I yanked my key out of the door and speed walked to my car. I still wanted to seem unbothered, praying this wasn't what I thought it was. Once I got in, I locked my car door and looked out the window. I saw a man in a baseball hat walking around in the dark. I was still on the phone with my boyfriend, and I started freaking out, saying things like, "Oh my god, he just got out of his car. What do I do?" My boyfriend told me to get out of there as fast as possible, and I did just that. But as I started to back out of the parking spot, I saw the man get back in his car. As I started to drive away, the man in the car started to leave too. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. When I pulled out of our parking lot, I pulled out right in front of someone. I probably scared them half to death, but I wanted to put a car in between me and this man. To my horror, the car ended up turning, and my pursuer sped up to be right behind me. I couldn't doubt myself anymore. I knew this guy was following me. When I think back to it now, he wasn't being very subtle at all. I knew I couldn't go home because I did not want this creep knowing where I lived. At this point, my mom and my boyfriend were both on the phone, and they told me to drive to the police station. I did just that. The man followed me all the way there. Once the police station turned into view though, the man's car sped up and flew past me. I have never felt so relieved in my life. I drove home as fast as possible, literally shaking as I began to process what just happened. I had never been followed like that before. I couldn't help but think what could have happened if I took a few seconds longer to lock the door. Or even worse, if I went up to the car to ask them to leave before I closed. Once I got home, my little brother offered to give me one of his pocket knives. His sweetness made me feel better. I'm definitely going to call my manager in the morning to check the security footage